Welcome back to the Victor Gonzalez Show, and today we're going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is one that is the highest paid in the NFL on a defensive standard, with Larry Ogunjobi, Tyson Awalu, Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, and Alex Highsmith as your starting 5 defensive linemen. You've got Chris Wormley, Isaiah Loudermilk, and Derek Tuska as your backup 3 linemen. Defensive linemen, and then at linebacker you have Devin Bush, Miles Jack, Marcus Allen, and Robert Spillane as your 4 rotational linebackers. Devin Smith and Miles Jack being your main 2. And then at cornerback you have Levi Wallace, Cameron Sutton, Akello Witherspoon, James Pierre, and Justin Lane. At safety you have the big name Minkah Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds, Carl Joseph, and DeMonte Casey. And then at kicker you have old and reliable Chris Boswell, and then you have Presley Harvin III, who's been the main guy. Now looking at this defense, you have 3 really big names. You got T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, and you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, I'm sorry. And those are your main 3 guys that are going to be talked about as the main keys of this defense. But what's not talked about is how young and how the Steelers have built this defense, with their backup D-line and their linebackers being homegrown. And you have guys like Devin Bush who have been brought in, or who have been brought through the draft and been one of their starters. You have Miles Jack, who got released by Jacksonville, and they said, we'll take him, and he can now be a top linebacker for them. And now at backup safety, you have Carl Joseph, a hard-hitting safety. You have Terrell Edmonds, a guy who they re-signed on an amazing deal for how young he is and how much potential he had out of college, and how he's played fairly decently in the NFL. Then you have DeMonte Casey as another safety who's an old veteran safety. And then you have Larry Ogunjobi, Tyson Awalu, who have been 2 very good interior defensive linemen throughout their tenures in the NFL, with Larry playing amazingly with the Bengals last year and Tyson always playing very well with the Steelers throughout his career. And then you have Marcus Allen as your 3rd inside linebacker, who's a very good linebacker, not the biggest of names and won't be making a Pro Bowl or anything like that, but a very serviceable linebacker. And the cornerback room, you bring in guys like Levi Wallace, Akello Witherspoon, you pair him up with Cameron Sutton, you have guys like James Pierre and Justin Lane on the back end of that cornerback room, and you have a very good team. And when you pair that with Terrell Austin in his 3rd year as a defensive coordinator, who's following in Mike Tomlin's footsteps as the main guy, or Mike Tomlin obviously being the main guy, but Terrell being the guy behind him, it allows for them to really work together as a team. And with this defense being one of the top ones last year, with the depleted Big Ben as their starting quarterback last year, and with them having a young quarterback and a young offensive line, which was spoken about in the last video, it's one of those things that you'll look at and say, well, when you have a defense like this, they're really going to need to step it up. And you can say with confidence that they will do that because we've seen it time and time again. Last year they made the 7th seed. And when you looked at Big Ben and you saw how he played, it wasn't like that you said, oh man, this team is for sure going to make the playoffs. It was a big question mark. And the Steelers somehow made it because of how well this defense played and how well Mike Tomlin put his team in situational football to go win football games, which is also, ultimately the main goal. That's why the Steelers and this AFC is so jam-packed, and why it's really crazy how a team like the Steelers, who have an opportunity to be a really good defensive team, may not make the playoffs and may do so, but it'll be a tough stretch, especially with how packed not only their division is, but the conference is.